hit this goal. I was at a holiday party with my mom, who's the most unassuming person ever. She could care less about money. She just doesn't care. She's, you have those friends or people that they truly just don't care. Like you could tell them you just made $100 million and they'd be like, that's awesome. Right. Like, and just like literally not care. Right. Most business owners, of course, are like, wow, that's, like that's different, but she just doesn't care. And I was like, hey, I made $500,000 this year. And she was like, oh, that's great. Pass the ketchup. And in that moment, I was like, man, people just don't care. Then I asked a deeper question though. And I was like, well, do I even care? And the funny thing was, it's not that I didn't care. What I was really asking is what I'm looking for going to come from money? And the answer is no. And it never is. Now, money is a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful thing to use. If you have it, that's great. It's not about not having money. It's not about not having things, but it's not going to ever turn you on inside the way you want it to. People get trapped into thinking that when people say go out and go get successful, what they're really saying is go get enough money, power, fame, authority, status, whatever it is, leverage that you can to control the situations around you so that they unfold just how you want them to, so that your inner experience becomes the one that you're looking for. And that's what people are really defining as level of success. It has everything to do with how they can get their inner experience. But if anybody's ever tried to do that, it's called being worldly, right? I'm trying to go out and manipulate the world to unfold the way I want it to, so I can feel better about myself inwardly. It doesn't work. You'll be scared. You'll be anxious. You'll be trying to hold things on. You can relatively get it better than other people, but it still doesn't work, which is why there are billionaires who are just miserable still. And that's why there's people who have no money who are static with joy and peace or fulfillment, whatever words you want to use there. It has nothing to do with that, right? It doesn't. Money is money. Joy is joy. Happiness is happiness. They're completely separate. And so for me, when I did that, I went on this, at that point, I went on this really deep inward journey. And for 3 years, it was like I was 99% ego, 1% inward journey, right? Like it was like very much that. But over time, when I got really deep into transcendental meditation, it was kind of like the gateway drug into spirituality for me. What happened though is the more I started really focusing on my inner experience, my outer experience became more successful. And so my businesses started to grow. The right things and situations opened up. Everything started leaning in a little bit differently. And so I just kept going more and more and more. So that's really been a, 25-year journey for me of this inner experience. And over the last 10 years has been really, really deep into spirituality, personal growth, whatever word you want to mean. All is it to me, spirituality or personal growth, it just means that I can handle reality, because that's what you're doing, right? You're handling the situation. I can handle somebody yelling at me. I can handle a lawsuit. I can handle my kids freaking out inside the grocery store. I can handle my wife being upset. I can handle the fact that I have emotions in there that come and go. I can handle reality. That's all spirituality is saying, is that I can show up and handle the situation. Because if you are a doctor and you can't handle blood, you're no good to the scene. If you are a leader and you can't handle the emotions of a business, you're no good being a leader. If you are a parent and you can't handle your kids screaming, you're no good being a parent. So the deep work that you do is getting rid of the part of you, or being able to stay seated enough so you can handle the situations that are unfolding. Because if you haven't noticed, life has been here for 4.5 billion years. You've been here for like 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years. It would be like having a 300 million page book, reading 2 words and being like, I know everything that's going on in this world. And that's not how it works. So when you do this deep work, it's plenty of room to be whatever religion or whatever faith that you want in there. It's just, I can show up and truly handle reality. So I'm not scared anymore. I'm not anxious. I'm not nervous. Or at least if those things show up, they don't grab me and I don't start acting or performing from that emotion. I just simply become aware of it and then I can act. So it's really like this. For me and what we teach in our organization, it's relax, release, and act. You relax yourself. You don't relax the energy. You relax who's witnessing the energy, right? You release it. And then you have, with clarity, you take the next step. You take action to solve the situation.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Unlocked from Within. Today's guest, we have Adam Hergenrother. He is a serial entrepreneur, author, and spiritual seeker on a mission to share the 200% life. Adam is a visionary entrepreneur, renowned leader, and a driving force in the real estate industry. With a relentless passion for personal growth and commitment to excellence, Adam has achieved remarkable success throughout his career. As the founder and CEO of the Adam Hergenrother Companies, a multifaceted organization that empowers today's leaders in developing the leaders of tomorrow. He has built one of the fastest growing real estate companies in the United States. His innovative strategies and unwavering dedication to team development have earned him numerous accolades and industry recognition. Adam is not just a business leader, he is a mentor, speaker, a best-selling author, and he's sharing his wisdom on leadership, entrepreneurship, personal development. His dynamic approach to life and business has inspired countless individuals to reach their full potential. Beyond the boardroom, Adam is an advocate for holistic wellness with a strong belief in the power of breathwork, meditation, and cold exposure to optimize mind and body. His commitment to continuous improvement extends to every aspect of his life. With a profound impact on the real estate world and a mission to inspire others, Adam Hergenrother continues to redefine success, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in business, spirituality, and life. When he's not growing his organizations, you can find Adam in the Vermont skiing the mountains with his wife and 3 children. Today, let's welcome Adam Hergenrother to the show. Hey, Adam.
How's it going?
Yeah, good. Welcome to Unlocked from Within. It's such an honor to have you on the show. Love to get into basically, your story and how it all started and, just how your upbringing was.
Yeah, Marty, thanks for all the deep work that you do with your guests and for your audience. And I know how much time and energy goes into that. So thank you for doing what you do and you're adding value. So thanks. Yeah, it's always an interesting question, kind of like people to kind of build a background story of yourself. For me, I had, I had great parents. We didn't come from money. In fact, I think I have 3 kids now and I see like even the trips that we take or just the things that they get. And I'm like, we were talking about this coming back from a lacrosse tournament, traveling one, my buddy and I never thought that I didn't have things, right? Like we just didn't, we didn't have money, but we just played outside all day. So it never, when you're not exposed to things, you just don't think like you're missing out on any stuff. But kind of fast forward through there, I had great parents, loving parents. They, for me, most of my childhood, I used food as a way to kind of escape reality. It's like a comforting, if you will. And I ended up gaining about 100 pounds overweight coming into my freshman year in high school, which is really not the time that you want to be 100 pounds overweight, like just a lot going on. And so to deal with that, I started doing kind of recreational drugs and really just, I stopped trying to do schoolwork. So I started failing classes, that role model student you wanted your kid to hang out with. But we kind of bring that, it's a really interesting point in my life because about 2 weeks into my freshman year in high school, I don't know what it was. And people have asked me, like, is there a moment or what it was? It was just something, all this kind of suffering, this pain had kind of built up over my life that I was always lying to everybody and not like big lies, but like be like, oh yeah, I did that too. Or like, I did that faster than what it was of trying to always be somebody else. And finally just caught up with me. And I just got to a point where I was like, I'm not going to live anybody else's life. And I didn't say it like that, but that's kind of what the feeling that was overtaking me was. And so I ended up stopping to hang out with these individuals that I was hanging out with. They were, again, they were just lost in their own world as well too. They hated the fact that I left their group and ended up getting into a big kind of battle with them. Police were involved. There was guns. There was a whole ordeal, and we can put a pin note and talk about that later if you want to. But and then I came home one day and I honestly, I just started crying. I put on Celine Dion, if you know who Celine Dion is, and I don't know why, but I had that track going on repeat. And I just knew that there was going to be something more in my life. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was going to be. And I just knew that I was no longer going to live this life. And my dad worked nights at the time and he came home and it was like midnight and he came into my room and he's like, why are you doing up? And he saw me kind of like disheveled. And I was like, I'm just not happy with my life. Or I don't know what I said, right? He was like, well, you can do 2 things. You can accept it or you can change it. And in that moment, I realized I was like, as much as like, it was like a 3-minute conversation, he went to bed. It was like, that's what I needed, right? It was like, nobody else is going to do this work for you, Adam. It's kind of like the tone, right? Marty, you know that nobody else can do that deep inner work for you. And so that projected me onto a different path. It was just an orientation shift. And I started, getting pretty heavy into sports, became captain of my football team, ended up getting into college. But, that was kind of the first, to me, kind of growing up, was a really big shift in my life. I left those friends, got new ones that are awesome, and just really learned during that time that you can really do anything that I know it sounds so cliche, but really for me, it was momentarily that I can do anything you wanted to do as long as you put enough energy behind it, and that becomes your North Star. And eventually, I turned that, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, I turned that into schoolwork. So school didn't come naturally to me. And I actually have a really tough time taking tests, and it's not really my thing for whatever reason. And but I did try really, really hard in school, and I went in the UVM, graduated pretty high up in my finance class, working harder than everybody else did. Just there's the smart kids that were there, and then from there, I shifted my energy into wanting to dominate the business world. I don't know how else to say it, right? I had this ego that was very large, that I had already had some success. I bought my first investment property when I was a freshman in college. So I was buying real estate. And then as soon as I got out of college, I literally, first of all, I thought for sure I was going to be on Wall Street. And at the time, I had a girlfriend who was still here and ended up getting a job up here that was pretty good. Best thing that I could do, because it allowed me to where I am today. But I really, and we'll put a pin in that and I'll let you go back. But I really, from there, I really developed a sense of trying to reach what everyone told me was success. And that's when I went after. And I think there's a different definition of success I'll use today. But at the moment, what success meant to me was going out there, getting enough power, money, fame, authority, leverage, right? That I would be able, then all of a sudden, by getting all of this, there was going to be some fruit tree in your backyard, filling you up with like peace and joy every single moment.
Yeah, very interesting. And like, how old were you when you first bought, your first property? Were you were you 21 or?
Yeah, I was 20 because I didn't turn 21 until sophomore year in college. So I was 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had $500. Actually, the really interesting thing about that story was, I had a roommate in college who was a roommate, but didn't go to college. I don't know if anybody had one of those before, but like slept on our couch basically. And his dad owned a car dealership, and he came to me and he said, look, I think we can buy this car for $1,000. We can fix it up and we can flip it. And so I had like $600, $700 to my name. And so I took $500 because I was working during school, and I took $500, gave it to him. And like a week and a half later, he came back and he was like, I'm sure we had some communication, but he came back and he was like, hey, we just sold this. We each made $1,000.
Wow.
I mean, I literally went from $500 to $1,500, and I was like, holy shit, like this is, no wonder why everyone's doing all this, right? This is the best thing ever. And so then I just rolled my money in over and over again. And finally, about 6 months into it, we had both made like 60 grand. And I also learned the value of contracts too, because at that point he's like, I don't need your money anymore. Like, you're not doing anything for me, which I get, which was fine. So I took that actually, and then invested that instead of spending it on things. I took that money, and that was, 2002. I bought an investment property. Of course, 2002, 3, 4, and 5 in the States, the real estate market was doing nothing but climbing. So I bought this piece of real estate pre-construction. And by the time I graduated in 2004, it was worth like $60,000 more than what it was. And so I was like, once again, this is, I wonder why everyone's in real estate. You just buy a piece of real estate and just goes up. Like, this is the easiest thing. And then of course, the market crashed and taught me a lot there. But that's when I bought my first piece.
Wow, similar paths. So like I was also 20 years old when I bought my first property. It was in 2005, and exactly the same way. It was, when I was 16, 17, one of my friends' dad, he was a used car dealer, and he would take us to the car auctions, and I'd see, that's where I started to educate myself on the value of cars and stuff. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I can do this myself. And that was my plan was, just flipping cars. And I got into flipping in cars and saved up,
That's awesome.
Enough for a deposit.
Yeah.
So
that's so cool.
Yeah. And so it's it's a way that you can make money, a way you can flip if you know what to look for. And, I think it's something that anyone can do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's such a cool that we have symmetrical stories there,
Yeah.
and it is, it's like, it was a side hustle for me, right? It was just, I was just learning. And I think, business building is nothing but surviving your failures. And it's about failing as fast as possible, as often as possible, right? But just fail small. Companies that get themselves into too many long-term contracts or debt are the ones that have to go bankrupt or hit different milestones like that. But people have this idea that building a business or starting a business is all about the success that you have along the way. It's actually the exact opposite. You have 99 failures and then one level of success, right? I mean, that's really what it is, about surviving those mistakes. And I think if you can do that early on, particularly when you don't have much responsibilities in lower dollar amounts, you learn valuable lessons that you can then bring into your business world.
Powerful, powerful. Like, yeah, someone once told me, like one of my mentors, he said it's, going into business for yourself is like, it's it's personal development on steroids. Everything comes to the surface, all your self-doubt, any limiting beliefs. If you're not dealing with it all comes to the surface. You can't hide.
Can't hide. Yeah, early on in my life, I started using the business is nothing but a conduit for my personal growth, and that was like a tagline that I had in my email signature for years. And that was something that I taught to all of our people too. That just, because look, you wouldn't sign up for lawsuits, right? You wouldn't sign up for trying to figure out how to, stop losses of your company. You wouldn't figure out how to actually spend all the money you make, right? Like, it's not just the lows that people think about. They always think that successes are going to be easy, but those can be just as challenging, just a different way than some of the challenges in the low side. In fact, I know a lot of business owners that have made, millions of dollars, and now they're caught in this place where they're like, they feel so much immense pressure to maintain this level of income that they can't give themselves reprieve from that at all. And so it's, again, it goes both ways. So it's really about being as clear as you can in the moment and raising the moment up so that the moment is better off for having passed by you.
And like, early on, like your parents, like, where do you think your drive came from? Like, do you think it was any influence from your parents, or is it, your surroundings, the environment you were within, with the friends that you were hanging out with?
It's a great question. If you would have, it's funny because I have this now, like I still live in the same state that I grew up in. And there's a lot of parents that knew me as like in middle school and high school. And they were like, we never would have thought you would have been, successful, whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah. To the level that you are, like, and it wasn't there. So and parents always like come up and they're like, you gave my child hope because they're like similar to you or whatever it was. Cause I didn't think I showed a lot of that. I tell you what I did though was, I always wanted to be the one that was in the midst of the chaos. I always wanted to be the one, I just remember, like, I don't know why I remember this, but we were growing up and I was like, I think the Gulf War was going on there. And I was like, man, my brother couldn't go to war. They'd have to send me. Like, I would be the one they have to send. Or like, hey, if there's going to be a tough time, like, even though my brother's older, I'd be like, no, like I need to go through that. My parents can't go through that. I'll go through it. It's almost like I was looking for these steps to like, be like, I want to be the one to go through them for the growth. And cause I can handle it. That's what I kept saying. It's like, I'll be able to handle that. They can't. And that came out, and then that showed up a lot more as I got into sports and then into college. That drive of like that work ethic really showed up. And it's funny, I participated in a course called the Advanced Honors Wall Street Seminar in the UVM, University of Vermont's Business School, and they take 6 kids from it, the top 6 kids. And I actually got chosen, a really lauded class to be in. And it was almost guaranteed you a job on Wall Street. Actually, it did guaranteed you a job on Wall Street. So you can imagine how everyone wanted to be in here. And when I got chosen, I had a B+ in the class, and other kids had higher grades than me. And later on, I actually talked to my professor. Actually, it's funny. This is a good story from a business standpoint, but he used to give these tests that were so difficult that the median test would be like a 21. And then he would curve them like 60 points, right? So everyone went in there. So later on, years afterwards, I went to him. I said, Jim, his name was Professor Gotti. If anybody ever went to UVM, he was like, he's either notorious or lauded, right? Like he was that guy. And I asked him, I said, why did you make these tests so difficult that literally like the best on the entire test would be like an 81 or like a 60, and then everyone else would be there. He goes, well, Adam, if I made the test so everyone could get an 85, how would I know who stood out? And basically he was like, look, there was only a handful, 3 or 4 people that got above a 50 every time. And he goes, and those were tested. People in other classes, if you can get an 85 and somebody gets a 95, how do I know they're really tested? And it was such a good lesson for me that I brought in the business. I've always kept that story in there about we have to find ways to test ourselves above and beyond, even if it means that it's going to something that's really hard. Anyways, he ended up taking me in this course because I worked harder than anybody else did. That was also the first time that I realized that it wasn't just about grades. Of course, that mattered, but it was more about your drive and your work ethic. And then looking back at it as employing and having thousands of people that work for me, I look back and making those hires. The people that graduated his class, went to Wall Street, would always go to him and say, who should I hire, Jim? Right? Because he would have the best candidates to give to you. And as you know, building a business, it's all about your people. So it was a huge recruiting tool. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back on it, it's so obvious and so clear that I remember just meeting with people that he would set us up with. And again, that was the reason. So for people that are out there that, are going through this or in there, like, it's not about your intelligence necessarily from there. I think that plays a role in it, of course, but it's also about what work are you willing to do? How much are you willing to give? You have to determine what's important in your life and go after that. I think there's a primary and I think there's a secondary. We can get into that more later. The primary is more about your inner strength and resolve and your inner experience that you're having. But there's a secondary, which is what you do in this world while you're here. It's kind of like that 200% life. But anyways, so that's just an interesting story for people to, if you're in building something. And I'll pause, but we had this lacrosse tournament. I coached lacrosse for my kids, a traveling team. And we were down in Massachusetts. It's this big, huge tournament. And we went down there and we rolled the first two teams like 15-0, and then 14-0. And we were coming in and we could easily won the championship and they would have come home. The second game, the kids were like, I'm bored. There's no competition. So we went around and we found there was 50 teams. We went and found the other team that had basically had similar results than we did. And we went and we said, look, we're going to beat this team. We'll play them if they want to, but we'd love to swap with this other team that has shown that they are equal value, or not value, but equal the ability that we are. And so we convinced the people organizing the games to switch. And so then all of a sudden we had this game. So now everyone's around for this championship game between these two teams. And we ended up losing. We were up and then we lost in the last couple of seconds. It was a battle. And the kids, they're 9, but they learned so much from this game, because I was like, look, you guys have never been tested like this before. You didn't see where your weaknesses were. You didn't see what your strengths were. You didn't see what we could work on our practice. You've never pushed yourself to that ability. And neither did they, by the way. That's why you play and push yourself to this degree to see what you're capable of. And I said, that's the lesson you take away from this.
Yeah, very powerful, very powerful. Like, I think when I was 12 years old or 13 years old, I was playing soccer at the time for a club, and it was sort of like a dream team. Like a few of the other best players from other teams, we just, became that team for the year, and blitzed it out of the park, won everything, whether it was like 3, 4, 5, 6-0, every game. All of it. It was awesome. But then the following year, they sort of dispersed, trying to find, who's going to be the best team. So a lot of players, dispersed. I still stayed in that team, and we lost every single game. So the duality from one extreme to the other extreme.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's all life, though. It's all life. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's a wonderful story.
Yeah. So going back on, your early years, at what point was it that you chose to do a year in Australia?
Yeah. Interesting enough, I moved to Brisbane, which is awesome. We talked offline before. My junior year in college, that's what I was saying before. Freshman and sophomore year, if you were to ask me, Vermont's way too small for me. There's nothing that this it's not going to hit my financial goals, not going to hit any of my goals. Just, I'm getting out of here. Right. So my junior year, I went to Australia, and I've always wanted to go to Australia. And for some reason, I don't know why, it's beautiful there. And I wanted to surf. So I went to UQ, University of Queensland. And I lived down there. I actually ended up staying for almost a year. And I went for a couple of months before, and I ended up staying a couple of months afterwards, just to experience the whole thing. It was an amazing, amazing journey. I also learned during that time how much I loved where I lived, how much I loved my locality, what I thought I was looking for was not going to be found in a geographic location. Again, it was my first kind of insight into my inner growth of realizing that the mind will trick you into telling you that there's green on the other side that's going to make your life so much better. And sure, for a couple of weeks, it can distract you. But when you stay there for months and you start living there, you realize like that doesn't work. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not going to work the way I thought it was. And so but I had a wonderful experience. I also learned how to like, I tell this to anybody going to college, like either it's a gap year or go somewhere else, get outside of your area and your parents and force yourself to learn. I went in 2003. And this was when like studying abroad was just coming on the scene, right? Like it wasn't as popular as it is now. I remember they just dropped us off. Like, I mean, literally, like I remember we went to a day before we went and we met this group of other people that was like 60 of them going over there. And then they just put us like this, here you go, right? And I had to figure out where the admissions campus was. I had to figure out how to open a checking account. I had to figure out how to drive in their car. I had to buy a car. So I just had to do all of that myself, little things that we take for granted. But it really got me to expose myself to how to be self-reliant and what does that look like on the other side of those things. And really, there's no help, right? I'm, 40 hours away flight-wise from Vermont, from where I am, way up in the East Coast. So it was as far away as possible that we could be from any type of like traditional safety net that I had. And so that was a wonderful experience. And again, also allowed me to make a decision to stay in Vermont when I had offers to work on Wall Street. And I ended up staying in Vermont, taking a much less pay cut, but knowing that I didn't know at the time, but knowing that it all worked out the way it was supposed to, but it was, if I hadn't done that, I would actually almost guaranteed I would have lived on New York for a period of time.
Wow. And, like from after that, where did you go in your career? Like, is that when you delved into being a real estate agent or?
So so right after college, I went in as a commercial underwriter. So I was making $32,000 a year, which I thought felt rich, by the way. So again, money is just a state of mind. It's money is money, joy is joy, but we can get into that later. So I felt, wealthy making that type of money. And again, it was 2005, but still, I went in as a commercial underwriter and was there for about 6 months. And I started underwriting all of these real estate deals. I remember seeing people making like 150, 300 grand, 500 grand, $700,000. And I thought these people somehow were like gods. I really did. I was like, man, they must be so brilliant or something. And I remember I started meeting with them, like right into them, like and learning. So I was underwriting their deals. And I was like, I remember like the third person I met with, I was like, Jesus, like, dude, I'm like, I didn't even mean it like this, but I'm like, I'm smarter than they are. I can do this better than they can. And I didn't mean it from an ego standpoint, even though I had an ego at the time. It wasn't even an ego thing. It was more of like, holy macro, like I actually can do this, right? Like these guys aren't gods or heroes, right? That they are at all. And of course they have a particular set of, attributes that they're exhibiting right now, but that can be replicated. I can learn from them. And so I just started learning from people. And then, I actually got fired from that job, which is a whole side thing. It's pretty funny, which was the best thing. And then I ended up taking another job that professor got me as a financial controller, started making $55,000 a year and had like my own secretary. I was in charge of like 5 people, 6 months out of college. Like it was awesome. I could create my own hours for the most part. It was great, right? Way back then. But I was really unemployable, to be honest with you. Like it didn't matter how good of a job I had. I was really unemployable. And I didn't want anybody to ever put a box on my thinking or the limits in my life, or really to tell me what to do. I don't mind holding myself highly accountable to things. I don't mind holding other people accountable. I just really don't like being held accountable to other people. It's just for whatever reason. So I left in 2006 to become a real estate professional in the midst of the worst economic downturn in like 50 years. And everybody around me thought I was crazy. They literally like how a bank just foreclosed on itself. Lehman Brothers just collapsed. Like the real estate market has dropped. All of this stuff, right, is just gone. And finally, I just said, by surrounding yourself by more intelligent individuals, anything is possible. So I borrowed $8,000 to start my first business and never looked back. And we can get into that, but I never really looked back and started selling real estate. And then I started buying more real estate and started building a brokerage company. And then I built an expansion technology platform. And then I built a construction company and built healthcare campuses. And just one thing kind of led on to the next and ended up bringing us to where we are today.
And where do you think like you felt like the momentum shift, where you just felt like, you were building some momentum and it just started, taking off?
I think 2011 was probably when I really felt that. Now that seems like a long time, but for the first 4 or 5 years, I was making back then probably like $200,000 to $300,000 my first couple of years right out of school. And when I was 26 or 27, I did have this income goal of about $500,000, and I hit that number. But it wasn't as much as about the income number, because at that point it was all based on my energy and effort. So I was working 7 days a week, 12-hour days. I actually enjoyed it though. Like I tell people that like it wasn't a chore. It was just I really enjoyed money and I enjoyed what came from that. And so I just worked really, really hard. What really shifted for me though was when I met a mentor of mine and he started teaching me how to build a business. And what I really loved about that was the ability to go out there and hire awesome people and watch them succeed at a level that was beyond what I ever thought possible, and almost getting out of their way, right? Just getting out of their way. I've actually fired myself from every position that I've ever really had in a company because I'm inherently lazy. I am like, once I get a company to a certain point, I'm not a great operator. I can do it, but I'm much better in terms of like training, coaching, or starting something and moving it forward that way. When it comes to operating, there's people that are way better than I am at doing that.
Yeah, awesome. And like, do you how important, looking back, like, if anyone's listening, the importance of having a mentor, like, was that in terms of, whether it's a business coach or a mentor or a mindset coach, whatever it is, how important was that in terms of getting you out of the way of your own business and learning to delegate, because there's only so much you can do. I think every business owner gets to a point where they finally feel maxed out and it's like, okay, I think this is time for me to grow the business. I need to employ people and delegate in areas I don't want to be doing.
I think the real question is whether or not somebody wants to.
Yeah.
I think the teacher will always show up. There's a lot of business owners that I know that come and read books and ask for advice and have the knowledge, but they're actually they're either afraid or they just unwilling to give it up, and they like to control everything, right? I mean, that's what happens for a lot of these small businesses, that you can even have 25 employees or whatever it is, but like they become the nucleus of the company. So everybody. So think about it as like most business owners become the nucleus of it. And so everybody revolves around their strengths and weaknesses. So the business is actually built on models and systems of the person instead of models and systems of a company. And so for me, no one ever succeeds alone at a high level, right? At all. And so for me, it was very interesting when I learned that I looked up and I go, man, the entire company is built on how I operate, not how a business operates, which prevents it from scaling. And so then the minute I removed myself, we had to rebuild the company because it was actually built on me. And then we built it on models, systems, processes, and procedures that can be scaled, not that can be scaled from an individual person. But you have to be willing to want to go through that journey. I always like to think of it as like the I to the we to they to theirs. The I and we is where most small businesses are, and they still have a job. Right. If you think about like two circles and there's like a job below it, both I and we point to a job. You still have a job. You may have employees, but you still have a job. And that's the I and the we. When you make this big step from we to they, that's when you get out of the way and the business itself starts being built on blocks and processes and scalability. You don't have to have $1 billion company, but it starts to be built on any level of scalability models and systems that are repeatable. And that's what you start to get into. And then theirs is where you take somebody and you make it their opportunity and you just become an investor for the most part, similar to how Warren Buffett kind of operates his world. But that's really what it was for me, is kind of switch. So I think if people want to go down that path, I think it's hard to go from we to they. It's really difficult. And what people a lot of times will do is they'll start going from we to they, and it gets way different. It feels different. They start losing money, things fall off, cracks happen, and they go, you know what, Marty, it's just way easier for me to go back and do this myself. And that's what you see. They naturally go back into wanting to own it because it's comfortable. They can get their income back up to what that level is. It takes a lot of grit and never giving up to bust through that wall that prevents you from having they run it.
So, like, if someone is listening to this and they're actually going through that right now, like, what would you suggest, like some strategies to help them to stay on the path?
Yeah, two things. One, you mentioned earlier, and I didn't do a good job following up with this, but you should absolutely have a coach or a mentor or somebody that you're meeting with, or a mastermind group, and make it with people that have experienced what you're going through so they can help you walk. They can't do it for you and they won't do it for you, but they can help tell you if you're on the right path. And so that's number one. Number two is just know that if you stay in the game long enough and you keep doing the right activities, it'll break. It'll open up. I remember building one of my companies that I ended up selling recently. It was for 12 years. I was like, I don't know if we're going to make it. I don't know if we're going to make it. Like, it's just, but just like you kept staying in it and staying in it. Finally it broke and then hit different levels. And then all of a sudden it was like, the entire economy went like this and people were offering, silly amounts of money for things. Like it was literally like, it was not just for our stuff, but for every company, right? It was just like valuations were through the roof, and it just happened to, you just put yourself in that position. So if you stay in it long enough, it will, and you're doing the right activities and you're willing to look at it, it will break. I mean, it's so simple, but it really does come down to, and I've shared this before, it just really comes down to is like this never giving up. I know it sounds so simple, but there's many, many times where every business owner that I've ever met, and probably like you, have sat down with a lot of billionaires, hundreds of millions of dollars worth, built massive companies. And they're like, we didn't know if we would make it. We didn't know if just read Elon Musk. He's like, we don't know if we're going to make it tomorrow. Right. Like, it's just like, so that self-doubt is always there. You don't have to act on it though. You just acknowledge and go, there's the mind going, we don't know if we're going to make it, but today I can go at least take this action. Right. And so you just don't buy into your own bullshit of what you're telling yourself. You just show up, keep putting in the work, let go of the part of you that's preventing you from enjoying the experience that's in front of you. And it'll eventually show you the path that you can go down. And you will hit your level of success, whatever that means.
Awesome stuff. And like, if someone realizes like they are in the way of their business, like it's them that's
mostly what it is,
right? It's them that's stopping themselves from scaling to the next level. Like, what would you suggest in that instance?
Yeah, you got to get really good at hiring and go find somebody that scares the shit out of you, that is way better than you, right? I mean, that's really what it is. And you just get out of their way. You just literally go out there, and most people, when they hire somebody, now they'll tell you that they hired somebody better than them. They'll tell you that, of why they hired them. But then you get in the organization, you realize it's not true, right? They made a decent hire, but they didn't hire an empire builder. They hire, and again, empire builders, they expect a lot. They expect the opportunity, meaning that you can't hold them close or they'll leave. They expect you to give them the reins of the company if you're hiring a CEO or a president or something along those lines. Now there's a handoff period, but you expect them to do that, and you kind of get out of their way, and you let them go operate and build a company. And that's really what, I mean, I think Warren Buffett has the best philosophy ever. Go buy successful companies, keep the management in there that's already successful, and just find some ways to tweak it to make it better, right? I mean, Coca-Cola was a big investment. He bought it. The next day he went out there and raised every Coca-Cola by 1 cent. And he had $7 million every 3 days to his bottom line. And the value went up. So again, it's like, it's go find people that are awesome, that want to work inside an organization, give them a big opportunity, and then just hold them accountable and just get out of their way. But it's about finding the who. It's once you recognize you're the one that's holding your company back, you have to replace yourself. So go find the who. And in my experience, and most of the time, it's not somebody currently on your roster either. Because if it was, they would already have left, or they've been begging you for the job. It may be. So don't take that as like a sign that it's not. But in most cases, the person you need to go out there to really get your company to that next level. Again, it could very well be that there's somebody on there. So don't people listening to this be like, oh, it's not somebody there. Just in my own experience, I've looked around and realized, nope, I needed to bring somebody in that may have been on the outskirts of my organization. I may have had some relationships with them, or maybe done business with them before, but I needed that person to come in there and make it their sole job to go out there and build this company.
Yeah. And like, I guess to the business owner that's now thinking, okay, that's awesome, Adam, but what about if like cash flow, like they don't think they can afford that person yet? Like, what would be some strategies they could put in place to work towards that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was building our first businesses and hiring people, I didn't know how I was going to pay for anybody. So let's just say, back then salaries were a little bit different, but let's just make up some numbers. Let's say you're going to go pay somebody $300,000 a year to run your company. I know it seems like a lot, right? Whatever it is. So let's just figure, say spend $300,000 a year. You go and say, okay, well, here's what we do. We build a 30, 60, 90. So it's the first 30 days. What do you expect them to do? After the first 30 days, they then basically can reapply for their job. Essentially, they automatically keep it if they pass go for the next 60 days. And then after the next 60 days or 30 days, what does it expect? So after 90 days, you have a plan that says, would you be willing to pay this person $300,000 if they accomplish this in the next 90 days? Right. And, it's not stretch goals. You're being realistic, but so then really what's your investment? The first 30 days is, call it 25 grand a month. So you go, okay, I'm putting 25 grand a month in the first 30 days. If they don't work out, I've lost 25 grand. And again, you can take just any dollar amount. You pay somebody 100 grand, you've lost 10 grand for that, right? Because back then that's about what I was paying. It's like $100,000. Now it's different, but you look at it not in terms of wow, I got to go pay somebody $200,000 a year for the whole salary. No, you get very clear and you have a plan for what they need to accomplish in the first 90 days. If they don't do that, you find somebody else. This is where people go wrong though, is because they will do this and then they'll let the person go, or they'll not hold them accountable. And then they don't hit their goals and end up costing them a bunch of money. And then they end up having to fire the person a year later and not have made any money. For me, I was really quick to fire people early on that didn't perform. And then I just got better and better at hiring, but it was really quick. Nope, they're not hitting these goals. I set it out very clear ahead of time. These weren't hit. We're going to find somebody else that can do this. And if you do that, you're holding your money accountable and you're holding the stewardship of what your responsibilities as a business owner are to the company, which is finding better people to run it. Right. And that's really what you do. You can also, of course, you can pay somebody straight salary. You can pay somebody salary plus a commission. You can pay somebody a salary commission plus, some sort of profits interest. Remember, profits interest isn't equity. It just means that if we make 100 grand a year, you give somebody 10% profits interest, it can come or go at any time. You can take it and they would make 10 grand, right? So you can set aside profits interest. You can do it, which I used a lot early on was, let's just say your company was making $500,000 a year. You bring them in and say, I'm going to give you a $150,000 base. That's for you to run the current company. And I'm going to give you 15% of anything that comes in above $500,000. Because really, company's already been generating this amount of income, and I'm paying you a base to run that. And anything above $500,000, I'm going to share the profits in with you. And you can make it 50-50. You can make it whatever you want for that. So those metrics are really good to do. So it's in finding somebody that is not looking for necessarily a big base, but they're going to want a higher back end, right? They're either going to want equity or they're going to want some sort of profits interest. In my experience, when the company becomes mature, you can then use your checkbook as a weapon. So you don't have to give out equity anymore, which is why startups give out equity, because everyone's taking a pay cut and they're getting equity along with it, and they recognize what they're doing. When your company matures and you can start paying people $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in base salary, you don't have to give out equity anymore. You can give out some bonuses or some percentage of their salary bonus. Like, I'll give you 30% of your salary, which on a $300,000 base would be an extra 90 grand bonus, right? So you can do stuff like that and actually makes the company more money. That's how most companies larger start running. But in the beginning, if you're doing that, look to partner with somebody, bring somebody in for a base, pay them after you've taken a certain amount of money off the table per year, give them equity. If they've stayed for 3 years, you can do set aside money. Again, I've never let salaries, relatively speaking, right, get in the way. It's not like you're going to go hire somebody for $5 million, right, if you can't afford that, but never get in the way of bringing on great talent. And so I've always found a way. The other thing I have to mention here is most people, they start investing into their lifestyle way too early on. And then they have too much pressure on their business to sustain and perform and uphold their lifestyle that they currently have to invest back into the actual business. And this is why people say they don't actually have money for it. It's not true. Most people are now, if they were spending 30 grand on their house before, or 30 grand in their lifestyle before, and now they're making $200,000 in their business, guess what? Their lifestyle is now 150 grand. So now there's no money left. And now, by the way, they still wake up with this massive pressure to perform, which is the most anxiety that any business owner will ever have, is to maintain a lifestyle and force the business to perform at a certain level to maintain your lifestyle. It's a terrible situation to be in. I've been in that before. And I know most business owners have. It's just not, it's way more comfortable to live below your means for a long period of time, And then once your business hits certain levels of maturity, to really start reaping the benefits. And give you an example of this. The mentor that I had helping me build this, and this is wild, by the way, but this is a true story. He was paying himself 150 grand a year, and he didn't increase his lifestyle. He didn't increase his lifestyle until his company hit $27 million net income.
Wow.
So just hear that for a second. I wouldn't I don't think you have to do that, right? But he took all his money, was putting it back in there. And what he did was really smart. He put it into very secure T-bonds so that the money, the 3 or 4% interest that he was making off those funded his entire life. And then one day he woke up and said, I'm free. I never have to worry about now any money that comes in. I can pay cash for something. I'll never leverage anything because I have enough money funding my personal life. They don't ever have to worry about my business succeeding anymore. And when you do that, you set your life up that way, you literally make different business decisions. You actually make smarter business decisions because you're not caught with it. You're not tied to it. You're not expecting it to perform. So it's some of the best advice that I ever got early on. I certainly didn't wait to that type of money to increase my life, but I think there's a fine balance and everyone just has to understand what that is.
Yeah, right. No, that's awesome advice. And, like, I guess for the audience out there, everyone loves to hear the big numbers. Like, so with some of your companies over the years, like what type of numbers were you hitting?
Yeah, I mean, there was years we made over $30 million. So I mean, like it was, in profit, and and it's a lot of money. And there was years that I made $100,000. For me, it was I set out, and this may be a good way to kind of introduce this into it. I set out to make about $500,000 a year, and I thought when I made $500,000 a year that I was going to be filled with this massive joy in this increased level of success that everyone talks about. And I want to come back to that level of success. And I remember I explained this in my book, and I explained this in other podcasts. You may have heard it before. But I remember when I hit this goal, I was at a holiday party with my mom, who's the most unassuming person ever. She could care less about money. She just doesn't care. She's just, you have those friends or people that they truly just don't care. Like you could tell them you just made $100 million and they'd be like, that's awesome. Right. Like, and just like literally not care. Right. Most business owners, of course, are like, wow, that's different, but she just doesn't care. And I was like, hey, I made $500,000 this year. And she was like, oh, that's great. Pass the ketchup. And in that moment, I was like, man, people just don't care. Then I asked a deeper question though. And I was like, well, do I even care? And the funny thing was, it's not that I didn't care. What I was really asking is what I'm looking for going to come from money? And the answer is no. And it never is. Now, money is a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful thing to use. If you have it, that's great. It's not about not having money. It's not about not having things, but it's not going to ever turn you on inside the way you want it to. People get trapped into thinking that when people say go out and go get successful, what they're really saying is go get enough money, power, fame, authority, status, whatever it is, leverage that you can to control the situations around you so that they unfold just how you want them to, so that your inner experience becomes the one that you're looking for. And that's what people are really defining as level of success. It has everything to do with how they can get their inner experience. But if anybody's ever tried to do that, it's called being worldly, right? I'm trying to go out and manipulate the world to unfold the way I want it to so I can feel better about myself inwardly. It doesn't work. You'll be scared. You'll be anxious. You'll be trying to hold things on. You can relatively get it better than other people, but it still doesn't work, which is why there are billionaires who are just miserable still. And that's why there's people who have no money who are ecstatic with joy and peace or fulfillment, whatever words you want to use there. It has nothing to do with that, right? It doesn't. Money is money. Joy is joy. Happiness is happiness. They're completely separate. And so for me, when I did that, I went on this, at that point, I went on this really deep inward journey. And for 3 years, it was like I was 99% ego, 1% inward journey, right? Like it was like very much that. But over time, I got really deep into transcendental meditation. It was kind of like the gateway drug into spirituality for me. What happened though is the more I started really focusing on my inner experience, my outer experience became more successful. And so my businesses started to grow. The right things and situations opened up. Everything started leaning in a little bit differently. And so I just kept going more and more and more. So that's really been a, 25-year journey for me of this inner experience. And over the last 10 years has been really, really deep into spirituality, personal growth, whatever word you want to mean. To me, spirituality or personal growth, it just means that I can handle reality. because that's what you're doing, right? You're handling the situation. I can handle somebody yelling at me. I can handle a lawsuit. I can handle my kids freaking out inside the grocery store. I can handle my wife being upset. I can handle the fact that I have emotions in there that come and go. I can handle reality. That's all spirituality is saying, is that I can show up and handle the situation. Because if you are a doctor and you can't handle blood, you're no good to the scene. If you are a leader and you can't handle the emotions of a business, you're no good being a leader. If you are a parent and you can't handle your kids screaming, you're no good being a parent. So the deep work that you do is getting rid of the part of you, or being able to stay seated enough so you can handle the situations that are unfolding. Because if you haven't noticed, life has been here for 4.5 billion years. You've been here for like 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years. It would be like having a 300 million page book, reading 2 words and being like, I know everything that's going on in this world. And that's not how it works. So when you do this deep work, it's plenty of room to be whatever religion or whatever faith that you want in there. It's just, I can show up and truly handle reality. So I'm not scared anymore. I'm not anxious. I'm not nervous. Or at least if those things show up, they don't grab me and I don't start acting or performing from that emotion. I just simply become aware of it and then I can act. So it's really like this, for me, and what we teach in our organization, it's relax, release, and act. You relax yourself. You don't relax the energy. You relax who's witnessing the energy, right? You release it. And then you have, with clarity, you take the next step. You take action to solve the situation.
Powerful, powerful. And combining obviously business and spirituality together, and it's taking your businesses to the next level. And looking back on your businesses now, like, to someone that's thinking about starting a business, you touched on, like, money's not the goal. Some people might be thinking, all right, I'm going to go into business. I'm going to make $1 million, $10 million, $50 million. But for what you've seen now and bringing business and spirituality together, what do you think is the keys to actually making a business profitable and successful? It can't just be we're going to make a lot of money. So what is the keys?
Yeah. The key is your intent, right? It's like, what part of you is actually doing it? So again, if you're driven by ego or that personal mind, right? So just back up for a second. Everyone has a voice inside your head, right? Like right now, make it say hello 10 times. Everyone can do that. Think of an apple. Maybe you thought of a red apple or a green apple. So there's a subject-object relationship with thoughts. There's a subject-object relationship with emotions. You're the one that's experiencing the emotion. You have anger. Did it come in? Did it go away? Yes. Every emotion has always come and it's always gone. Every thought, by the way, has come and gone. So you're not your thoughts. You're not your emotions. So then who are you? You are the one that's experiencing this inner experience, which is emotions, which is the voice inside your head, in your spiritual heart, which we can talk about later on. But you're the one experiencing all of that. So that's who you really are. Right? So that's the primary part of your life, is to recognize and realize who you are. Steve Jobs, right? I think most of us would agree he's accomplished some pretty cool things that are out there. For 7 years, he faced death, right? And his last gift and his last message, which you may already know this, was giving out 500 books of the autobiography of a yogi. And it's all, that book, by the way, is all about self-realization. And in his last gift, the note that had in there was basically, the most important thing in your life is self-realization. It's realizing who you are. And that's, again, coming from a guy who's built Apple. He had money, he had success. And his last gift was for everybody at his funeral to take a copy of the autobiography of a yogi and read it, because the most important primary goal was to self-realize. And again, for hundreds of thousands of years, we've been inscribing that on temples and on pyramids. Know thyself in different ways, the Taoism, the middle way, all of these things. It's only been the last 50 years that life coaches have come on and been like, Marty, what do you want out of life? Let's go figure out how to go get that, right? No, it's about self-realize. There's nothing wrong with those things. Those are all secondary. The primary thing is, what part of you is interacting with life? So if the part of you is thinking that if I go get money, I'm going to feel better, I'm going to scratch this itch, I'll be able to relax and have this go away, it doesn't work. I don't care if you have $30 million, $300 million, or $3 billion, or $300 billion, you'll still feel that same way, right? You're still going to feel that if you don't solve it inwardly first. If you work on the inward first, which is why it's primary, then everything you do in the outer world just becomes part of the things that you do. I'm not going to say it's going to happen the way you want it to. I'm not going to say every part's going to be morally right or morally wrong. It's just going to unfold, and you're going to be there interacting with it because, again, you can handle reality. So when you recognize this, which I think most people are that are waking up, especially if you've listened this far, there's a part of you that's probably recognizing going, yeah, you know what? When I was 16, I thought of getting my driver's license was going to be the end. And then when I thought, when I found my first girlfriend or boyfriend, that was going to be the end. And then when I got my first, $50,000 job, that was going to be the end. And then when I made my first 100,000, that was really going to do it. And then your mind convinced you that it's not 100,000 anymore. If you just get to 500,000, that's going to be the ticket. And let me tell you, folks, it's then 500, then it's 1 million, and then it's 10 million, and then it's 100 million, and then it's 1 billion. But if you just keep going on that, eventually you will do it. That part of you is never satisfied. It never will be. Its nature is to never be satisfied. So you wake up and realize that's what the whole term awaken means, is that it's not that you're an enlightened being. You've woken up and realized, holy shit, this game that I've been playing of trying to go make the world the way I want it so I can feel better inside doesn't work. It's an indirect way of doing it. So the new way of kind of looking at it, right, which to me, I think is much easier and simpler, is to go do the inner work first and then show up and build a huge business. Take a private jet, go live in the woods, isolate. It's either what, look, the idea of going and having a minimalist life is still a thought. The idea of going and having a lavish life is a thought. They're both thoughts that you're just acting upon. So one may be better in terms of like your mechanical nature of money, but if you have all the money and you go live a minimalistic life, it's just no different than going out there and having a jet, right? It's just, so those, to me, it's irrelevant how you do that. It's the part of you that's actually interacting with the moment in front of you.
Powerful. And like, do you think the biggest thing, for people to shift, like the businesses that are successful and profitable and last, the focus is on the intention of serving others. It's not about them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can call it service. You can just call it, does an apple tree consider itself contributing to the animals? It just shows up and produces apples. Right? Like it just does. Does Mother Nature see like it's contributing by raining to the plants? It just rains. So it's almost like you lose the word serving, because it's like serving makes it feel like you're doing something better than somebody else. To me, it's just you show up and whatever the moment is in front of you that's being asked of you, you help the moment. So the moment is better off for having passed by your life. That's as simple as what it is. And so I just like to drop even the words. But in this context, yes, it's about, I don't know if you ever read the Bhagavad Gita, probably the second most read book in the world outside of the Bible. It's the Hinduism Bible. But in there, there's wonderful lines that talk about how there's nothing wrong about holding businesses accountable or people accountable. But what you're doing is you're letting go of the personal gain that comes from that. So you're still acting, you're still holding accountable, you're still firing people, you're still hiring people, you're still interacting with others, you're still building a product, you're still dealing with layoffs, you're still dealing with hires, you're dealing with all of the stuff that goes on with that. It's just you're not doing it so that you personally gain. Hold on, but just remember this. It's so that you personally gain, and with that, you feel it's going to change your inner experience. You will still likely gain financially, you will still likely gain experiences, but you're not doing it in a way so that that personal money that comes in is going to make you feel better, or that definition of success. It's such a fine line, but once people get it and you realize that, man, your life just opens up, and you're literally, think about what it would be like just wake up tomorrow morning with no anxiety, with no stress. I don't mean stress of like, I just mean like, oh shit, my alarm didn't go off. Now I'm pissed off, right? How come this light's going this way? Like you just drop all of that and you're able to just freely interact with life.
Awesome stuff. And like, I guess, yeah, like, for the audience listening, your latest book, the 200% Life, it's an amazing book about going inwards, and you speak about business and spirituality existing together. But there was a part in the book that I was quite interested in, if you could further elaborate on, which is, explaining, about the art of surrendering.
Yeah. People, it's funny. I mentioned Steve Jobs earlier. He used that word a lot later on in his life. People in business hear the word surrender and they cringe. They think surrender is some level of passivity, that it's about letting people walk over them, or not turning a profit, or letting a lion just eat you in the middle of the path. It has nothing to do with that. Surrendering is you're surrendering the part of you that has a problem with the reality of life. That's what you're surrendering. So you're not surrendering the action. You're not surrendering to somebody like you're giving up. It has nothing to do with that. It's not passivity at all. But, and just give an example, which everyone can have. Some past 90 days or probably less, everyone listening to this has gotten an email that has triggered them, that has disturbed them, right? So you get that email and you see the subject line from the person and you're like, mother, right? And before you even open it, you see the email and you're already triggered, you're fired up. Now you're lost, right? So and now you go in there and you open it up and you're like, how dare they ever do? And you're just writing away and you send that email. And you may have even said, I've worked on myself, and you may have cut a sentence or two out of there, right? Like you're like, and I feel better about myself. You send it off and you do feel better. And then you wake up the next morning and you look at your reply and you go, what the hell was I thinking? So surrender is that part of you that got fired up. You let that part go. So you come back to clarity and then respond. That's what surrender means. It's surrendering the disturbed energy that then you express outwardly. Remember, anger itself cannot calm down. Anger's nature is to be angry. A wolf's nature is to howl. I mean, you don't watch a wolf eating grass and a deer eating a bunny, right? They all have their own nature. So anger or any emotion has its nature and its vibration. So that itself will never be calmed down. But what you do, you're in there witnessing and experiencing it. You who's in there can surrender to that energy and let it pass through. Now you're clear. Now you handle the situation. That's really, again, if you are a doctor and you can't handle blood, you're no good to the situation. So it's the same thing. If you're a parent, your kid's acting up and you're freaking out, you're no good to helping that situation, right? You now are just expressing and dumping all of the lower self, the lower energy out. So when people really use that word surrender, you're surrendering that part of you. So then you can show up and act with 100% clarity and make the highest decision that you can make in that moment.
Powerful. Like for me, I find to catch myself out, like try to catch the pause, is I do, breath work, or the Wim Hof method, or if, I know that I've got an important meeting, just to come into it neutral, clear whatever thoughts I've got, or anything that I'm trying to, just coming at it at a neutral space. Yes. What are some of the things that you find helpful for yourself?
Yeah, awesome. So I like to be proactive, and then a technique to use, while you're in there. I mean, and I'm not the best technique person. I'll share what I do, but there's thousands of techniques that work. It's really, I'm like, whatever type of works for you, you should be doing. But one thing I did do from a business standpoint is every time I used to go get out of my truck to go into my office, before I'd get out, I remind myself, I am here to contribute. I'm here to show up. I'm not here to get anything from my employees. I'm not here to get anything from my clients. I'm here to be. Now, it didn't stay with me all the time, but that was my intent walking in there. And so then every time I'd walk through a door, kind of as an anchor point, I would remind myself of that and just do that. If an email came in like that triggered me, or a phone call was coming in, I could see the person, it was the name that I just didn't want to talk to, and I instantly am disturbed, I would use I use what's called like a 3-2-1 relax. I just go 3, 2, 1, and just drop your shoulders and relax. And you might have to do that like 10 times in a row if it's something that's a big disturbance. It's doing that. The other thing is you can be really mature about this. The other day, I use this example, like my wife was sitting there eating a chip. And for some reason, her eating the chip was irritating the shit out of me. Like I'm serious. Like it was so, and it had nothing to do with her. She was reading a book, and I'm like, every time she'd like chomp down it, I was like, it was like I could like punch a wall, right? You ever felt like that? Like I was literally like so irritated. And I'm like, man, I'm about to lose it on my wife, who I love, and has nothing to do with her. So I shut my book. I got out, I walked outside, and I just let the energy pass, and I could walk back in there and handle the chip. Right. So again, if you kind of like, it's kind of like AA. If you don't put yourself in the situation, if you know you're going to explode, same thing here, be mature about it. I did the same thing with my kids. I have 3 under 11. So it's like, whenever they start doing that, I feel myself about to say something that is either raising my voice or not the best use. I'll leave the room. I'll walk out. I'll go run. Now, I also said I do like to do some things preventative. So I start my day between 4 and 4:30 every morning. I meditate. First thing I do is when I get up, and then I go into a series of journaling, and then I get into exercising. And I usually do like 1 to 2 hours a day, and then like 2 to 3 or 4 hours on my longer days of exercise. But for me, doing that for like 3 hours each morning sets me up so that I'm positioned to basically handle life the best that I can today, right? And so that's kind of like it's like preventative medicine, if you will. So to me, that works really well, and it helps put me in that position. And if I miss any of those things, I'm just off a little bit, right? I could trigger a little bit more. And so I recognize that. So there's a preventative part of that, and then there's in the moment, what do I do? And then here's the last thing: is you're never going to succeed at this perfectly until you reach a really high state. And just like all of us, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's harder than making money. It's harder than relationships. This whole inner experience, this whole inner growth work is harder than anything you'll ever do in your entire life. And it's extremely painful to do the real work. You're going to mess up. You're going to get triggered. You're going to get Velcro to the emotion. You're going to say stuff that you didn't want to say. Don't beat yourself up. Don't think it should be different. Don't think that you're on the spiritual path and you're going to be perfect. Just go, yeah. How fast can I get back to recognizing that I screwed up? Right? Like, I'll give you this personal example. I told you earlier, I was teaching lacrosse, and my son was not passing. He kept kind of going down the ball, and like this was going on and on. Finally, like I just yelled. I was like, Asher, pass the ball. And I was like, get off the field. And he came over and he's crying. And now I'm like, oh, man, I just lost it right there for no reason. Right. And so I get in the car and I look at him like, that's what happens when ego takes over. That's a great example of this, because I try to be as real as possible. I said, I made a mistake, and there could have been a different way I should have handled the situation, and I lost it. And I just want you to know that I'm not perfect, but I recognize I'm back to it. And I wanted to at least apologize. And the next morning I woke up and said the exact same. I looked him straight in the eye. First thing in the morning, I said, I know I said this to you already, but I want you to know, I apologize. I'm really sorry. I lost this. You're going to do this too. And so I'm trying to teach you how to actually handle the situation when you lose it as well, because we're not, the human nature is to be imperfect. And so, and just be as clear and transparent as possible. Then that energy can release itself as well too.
Awesome. Awesome stuff. And like, in the book you mentioned, Phil Jackson, talking about,
Yeah.
letting go of the outcome. He's won 11 NBA championships as a coach. Like, can you delve a little bit into, letting go of the outcome?
Yeah, that's wonderful. He was famous, in 1990s, he was trying to get his NBA players to meditate. Again, it's common now, but like 1990s, I mean, not so many people were meditating, especially NBA players. And he would give them spiritual books. But in an interview, he would say, he's like, well, what is your kind of secret? I don't know how they asked it. And he said, well, the reality is we get really prepared. We train as hard as we can. We fight as hard as we can. But the minute we get out into the game, we let go of the outcome. And they go, why would you let go of the outcome? Isn't that just surrender? And he goes, no, letting go of the outcome is just way more fun way to live. And it's how it is. So once you let go of the outcome, it doesn't mean you don't participate. It doesn't mean you don't try hard. It just means that you're no longer attached to a particular outcome. Therefore, you're not going to suffer.
Awesome. Awesome stuff. And one of the other points I wanted to touch off on the book on 200% Life, which, I think it's a must read if you're in business, even if you're not in business, which I highly suggest everyone getting, is, you mentioned about the Tibetan book of Living and Dying by Sogil. He shares his thoughts like, perhaps the deepest reason why we are afraid of death is because we do not know who we are.
Yes.
So what, can you elaborate on that?
Talking about death is one of the, things that I really enjoy, not from a morbid thought, but so many people feel like they can't talk about it, and we're all going to die if you haven't realized. And I actually was on a Project U call yesterday, all of our folks that are going through this course. And I said, just go every now and then, just go pull up like CNN or WCAX, just local sites or whatever news outlet you want to do. And just scroll down and see how many people died in the last hour. And I go, that could be you at any moment. 54 people died over here. 11 people died in this Bucks ass. It's like, just like that, you're out. You're here and you're out. So again, death is not a morbid thing, but it's going to happen. And so the purpose of your life can't be to build a business. It can't be to have kids. It can't be to leave a legacy. The purpose of your life is to realize who you are. And that's what Steve Jobs was trying to figure out. The only reason why people really fear death is people fear death because they still think that life owes them something. They still think that there's some special experience that life is trying to give them. Well, the reality is when you're living mind or mind ego, you're never experiencing life. So you're never going to experience it. Once you realize who you are, you're now deep in the moment, and then death can take nothing from you because you've experienced the moment as fully as you can. But that's why people fear death so much, is they're like, I need one more week for what? What do you need one more week for? I need to go experience something. Well, why aren't you experiencing now? Because I'm living in my mind. And that's what, even people listening to this podcast right now, I would ask themselves, are you actually listening to Marty and I talk, or are you listening to the mind narrate this conversation and tell you whether or not you like what I said or don't like what I said, you agree with me or don't agree with me? And most people will go, yep, I've been doing that. Actually, I liked what you said here, but I didn't agree with what you did. And you buy into the mind telling you about the situation. That's living mind. It's like the old adage in spirituality, they say it's essentially mistaking the menu for the meal. Most people are reading a menu thinking that it's an actual meal. Well, doesn't the meal have a different experience than reading it? One can be fulfilling. One can just be with empty promises of reading something. Most people are living their entire life reading a menu. And that's why they fear death, is because they've never experienced the actual burger.
Wow. Powerful stuff, Adam. One last question, I guess, for everyone out there listening. Well, two last questions. Obviously, the first one is, your biggest failures or setback that comes to mind, and basically at the time it would have been the biggest failure or setback, but how it turned into a blessing. What comes to mind?
I would say when I'll give you two real quick. One, when I was fired on that job, I talked about that earlier. I remember my mom gotten fired, and the company I was working at had specifically told this company I was at to not allow them to have access to their financials. And they told them that they had fired my mom because they didn't have any money. And I was actually working on the guy's file, and he was just at my college graduation. So I called them up and I said, hey, you told my mom you didn't have any money, but I'm looking at your account right now and you have plenty of money. I'm just curious as to why you actually fired her. He hung up the phone and then called the bank and said, how come this had access? And I was the lowest one on the totem pole, got fired. So now my mom and I are sitting at our house, unemployed. And I was like, like 23 years old. And I just remember being in such a lull, being like, what the hell? Like, how could I be in this situation? I should be making all this money. And then, of course, that path, what seemed like such a failure, the guy who fired me 6 years later ended up giving me, it was called the Rising Star of the Year Award for entrepreneurs at a gala event in front of 3,000 people. That was the next time I saw him. And I came up on stage and I shook his hand, and he's like, I forget what he said. It's like, ironic we're meeting here again like this, huh? And he's like, it's a good thing that I let you go. I said, yes, it was. So I ended up coming full circle with it. But again, that was the best thing. The other thing I would say from a business standpoint is to not invest more money into my business early and into making bigger hires than I thought I could bring in. That was something I would do earlier on, faster.
Awesome stuff. And obviously this podcast is called Unlocked from Within. So there is similarities with the theme of your book, 200% Life. But what does Unlocked from Within mean to you?
Yeah, it means that life is not 100%. Life is actually 200%. So what you're doing is, most people are focused on unlocking the 100% in the outer world. And to me, I would say unlocking within means that you are unlocking the 100% inner world first, which then unlocks 100% of the outer world as well too, which becomes fun. And that's really the whole essence of 200% Life. Is a model. It's a roadmap. It's a way of first unlocking your inner world, right? And then unlocking the outer world, because it's just fun to play in.
Awesome stuff. And one last one I should touch on, it is obviously you're in Vermont, so you've got to be a mad skier, I'm imagining.
I live in Stowe, Vermont, so it's like the iconic ski of the East Capital. And yeah, I ski. Once skiing happens, I start skiing every day, and I skin a lot. So I skinned like 400,000 vertical feet last year, and so I'm in the mountains playing all the time.
That's awesome. Like one of my businesses called the NFPD Snow Brand. It's short for No Friends on Powder Days. So you'd know that saying. It's yes. World renowned. So yeah, I'm a mad snowboarder when I can go snowboarding, and I find for me, I feel I'm at the most oneness, like connected when I'm snowboarding. I'm most present, whether it's doing a bit of backcountry, I'm the most alive. Everything. I'm just buzzing. And I imagine that would be the same for you.
Yeah, some people like, oceans do it for them. I
Yeah.
mean, oceans are beautiful, but they don't turn me on the
Mm,
same way the mountains do. And I
mm.
I, I think I think some people cities do that for. I think some people's do like deserts do that for. But for me, it sounds like for you, when I'm in a mountain, it's a different feeling of energy, and I feel more again alive and one with what it is. And doesn't mean you can't be, but I think again that's why I choose to be here. And I'm a much more of a river guy and a mountain guy than I am an ocean. So I just get to enjoy the beautifulness of being alone in nature.
Awesome stuff, Adam. So, yeah, where can everyone check you out? Obviously, we can get 200% Life on Amazon, which I highly recommend everyone getting, whether you're into spirituality or if you're into business,
Yep.
or anyone. But yeah, where else can people reach you?
Yeah, the Audible should be out, in a couple of weeks, depending on when this episode airs. AdamHergenrother.com. It's pretty easy. It'll probably be in your show notes. It links to our podcast. It links to a bunch of free downloads, free courses that we have and that we're teaching. So people can find us out that way.
Awesome stuff, Adam. Again, thanks for your time. It's been an honor. And like I said, I think everyone should check out 200% Life. It's a must read.
Marty, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks again, Adam. Thanks again for listening or watching another episode of Unlocked from Within. Please like and share the episode with anyone you think it may help. Please comment what insights you learned from the interview. And if you'd like to learn more about Adam Hergenrother, please check out Adam at his website, adamhergenrother.com, Instagram, Adam Hergenrother, LinkedIn, Adam Hergenrother, Facebook, Adam Hergenrother Co. That's CO. YouTube, Adam-Hergenrother, and his podcast. If you'd like to listen to more of Adam, you can check out his podcast, The 200% Life, on Spotify, Apple, and all other podcast platforms. If you'd love to purchase his book, you can get it on Amazon, and it's called The 200% Life. It's a great book, which I highly recommend reading if you're into business or spirituality. And like I said, it's something I think everyone should read. If you'd love to reach out to me for my next workshops, corporate events, or would like to experience a one-on-one Unlocked from Within session to remove and clear any trauma, limiting beliefs, or subconscious blockages, please contact me at martyclay.com. Again, thank you for listening to Unlocked from Within. Thanks. Bye.